Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. We're Performance Agile. I'm Eric.
And I'm Vince.
And today we're talking user stories.
So because we're talking about user stories, one person who is very associated to user stories and story mapping is a guy by the name of Jeff Patton. And one of his many quotes is, "Stories are the building blocks of communication between developers and those who use their work."
So for anybody that has worked in an Agile shop, whether you're doing Kanban, Scrum, XP, you've probably come across the user story. First order of business for this video is history. Where did the user story originate? Because it did not come from Scrum, right? Where did it come from?
Well, I don't believe it came from Scrum. As I understand it, as the story goes.
That's right.
Right. That in extreme programming, they were using the little sticky papers, and somebody walked over and said, "Hey, we need to talk about this." One engineer to another, and so basically, let's talk about the story behind this ask. And so I believe that that's the genesis of the story. When Scrum adopted that, they used the term user story, and a lot of that, the user story comes from the way that the story is structured.
Right, because now we are adopting the persona of the end user when we write our user stories. So real quick, let's talk about the structure.
Mm-hmm.
What is the structure of a user story?
Typically, the structure is, as a user, I want or I need so that. And so when you take that approach, rather than the user story is the Agile replacement for detailed requirements or use cases, things like that. So from the user perspective, when me personally, I prefer to inject a persona into the as a user, instead of saying as a user, as a specific persona.
Right.
I need, right? It's not I want, because I want a lot of things, but I need this so that.
Right. So who, what, and why.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So a good example could be, as a user of a website,
Mm-hmm.
I need the ability to sign in to my profile
Mm-hmm.
so that I can access my order history.
Correct.
That'd be a great example of a user story.
That would
Capture who,
Mm-hmm.
user of the website,
Mm-hmm.
they've created an account,
Mm-hmm.
they want to be able to sign in.
Yep.
Why? Access order history. That's
Correct.
a great example.
So when we talk about that kind of a structure, with that, I've used the term lawyered up previously. When we talk about going from one extreme to the other, that shift in the pendulum coming back has done just that. So rather than being really high level and vague, in the some earlier versions of the user story, that lawyering up, bringing that pendulum back, has added some more details to the user story, and I guess rightfully so in most cases, where we now have things like in acronyms called INVEST and SMART, and we use structure like Gherkin, given, when, then. Why don't you tell them a little bit about given, when, then?
Sure. So given, when, then is kind of correlated to behavior-driven development. Gherkin is derived from behavior-driven development, but it is given a set of assumptions or facts or parameters. When a user or scenario happens, there is a set of behavior
Mm-hmm.
that occurs. So going back to the login example of logging into a website, you would say, given the user, in this case it would be me, has previously registered to the website, I have an active account, I have a username, I have a password, and I'm on the correct sign-in screen for that particular website, right? So those are all the given assumptions. Those are all things we are expecting to be true
Mm-hmm.
For this scenario. I input my username and password, and I click login. So when I fulfill those sets of criteria and I execute the login step, the behavior we would expect would be an authentication check against the username and password to make sure it's correct. And if it is correct, I am successfully signed in. But if it's incorrect, I am redirected to the login screen and it says, hey, incorrect username and password, try again. Now, why that is important is it helps you build out acceptance criteria and test cases, which is part of the definition of done for a user story. That's how that all kind of...
It all ties together. Very nicely done.
It all ties together.
Yep. And so that's why, I say, and rightfully so, because, you can be too vague, and we want to get away from ambiguity, right? I need this to be fast. Things like that. So we need to have a little bit more specificity in our stories. And a story is one of the lowest levels of decomposing work down, and we do that in tools, and there's a variety of tools, but even without tools, if we were to do it on a wall or a board, there are usually some layers that precede the user story. Once you give them an example of some of those layers.
Yeah, so user stories, we're typically getting into the weeds of things. So there's different layers of hierarchy depending on which tool you're using. Jira, for example, is theme, initiative, epic, story. That's a good example.
Right, or they often come with capability, epic, story, and task. Seen that?
Even subtask. And it's going to depend on where you're at, your organization, how they want to structure something. But toward the top, we have some theme, some initiative, some capability that is wanted, right? That's like your strategic level. We're saying, hey, this is a function we want that we don't have, or it provides a strategic business value that we want but we don't have. So then you start breaking down those big strategic themes into organizational themes or program themes. Again, it's going to depend on your organization how you want to organize that, but you're talking epics and features at that level.
Correct.
So down at the team level, we're starting to say, okay, now we're going to go turn wrenches and pound out code. Our heads down on a keyboard. We're talking user stories.
Correct.
So you just take strategic, operational, tactical.
Very good.
You break that down.
Very nice. And in earlier videos, we very lightly touched around that when we talked about product delivery model, the end-to-end value stream flow from, business to the team, and then out to the customer. This is what we're talking about, just exactly what he conveyed. The business says, we project that we need this capability. And so that high-level vision gets decomposed and broken down through a variety of different planning sessions. And then the next thing you know, the team is refining that down to something that they can actually build, whether it's, through manufacturing or software. So that is the user story. And also, I would probably, I should probably mention too that on an equal level of the user story is a task in some cases, where not everything is a story-based kind of a work that needs to be done. Sometimes it's literally a task. And that can also be something that doesn't have to fit the same model, but should be, it is something that will be accomplished by the team at that level. Anything else?
I'd say when it comes to the user story, it's when you're getting into good detailed user stories, breaking down those high level capabilities, those high strategic themes all the way down at the team level. You're doing a lot of documentation. You're doing a lot of refining. There's a lot of conversation happening. We hear the Agile myth that Agile says we don't do requirements or we don't write anything down. We're Agile.
We don't plan.
Yeah.
It's chaos. Yeah. No, there's a lot of planning. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot of conversation. There's a lot of collaboration before the work is done and while the work is being done, and even that feedback loop with the customer even after the work is done.
Because
So
user stories should be demoed, or at least at a
Mhm.
minimum features. That, if you're doing feature-driven development, if you're going to have a feature broken down into many user stories, and then you're going to present that feature, or you're presenting your stories to your customer, because you're taking their persona of this is my customer who I'm delivering for, they should have a say in whether or not your stories meet the acceptance criteria, or that's where successful delivery of working software and happy customer comes in, tying it back to the Agile Manifesto.
correct. Now let's just quickly not spend a whole lot of time, but we need to talk about. So the user story is something that the team will actually solution to. What is the difference between a non-functional requirement or a non-functional user story and a functionally based user story? And can they be orphaned on their own, or should they be tied to that structure for traceability?
Well, I'm of the mindset that any work that is done for a program should always trace back to some higher level objective. Doesn't matter. Lowest task should always have some significance to the business, because if it doesn't, if you're saying, well, I just did a task for a task's sake, why'd you do it? You wasted potentially hours, days, weeks doing something that the business didn't want you to do.
The company has invested a lot of money into the product that you're working on, and you need to show evidence of, we did this work. Is that really what the business wanted, or what the customer wanted? So yes, you are documenting what you are doing, and you need that traceability back up to the need. So
like a good example of a non-functional story or task is legal approval. There's no real code there, but getting legal involved to make sure that you're not breaking any rules set by the FCC, or whatever governing body you might be facing, HIPAA, SOX, whatever you name it. So getting them involved in your software approved. That's a good example of a non-functional task. So
also known as
that.
technical enablers. So sometimes engineering will need to implement something so that a user story can be solutioned for and be implemented, put on the network, etc. So sometimes there are the engineers say, that's great. We can't do that unless we do this. And so that carries a lot of weight. And sometimes in some organizations, it's dismissed as, well, that's not, the user doesn't want that. Well, if the user wants this, they have to have this. So this is now also a priority based on that user need over here. So keep that in mind.
User wants a roof above their head. Well, they're going to need a foundation and 4 walls to surround them.
Yeah. So along that line, so technical enablers, non-functional or non-user story based stories or tasks are very important. They are equal to user stories in the backlog and should be weighted and prioritized appropriately.
Well, that's it, folks. That's another video. Hope you enjoyed this one. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment, hit that like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and do so, and share it with your friends and family. And we'll catch you on the next video.